Deep sea divers, what are your horror stories? Diving the day before a hurricane on a small South Pacific island. Out of nowhere a black and white sea snake, venomous, wrapped itself around my arm. Apparently this happens from time to time before major storms. They can sense it and look for things that are heading towards the shore so that they don't have to put in so much effort to get out of the sea. As soon as I was in the shallows it uncurled and headed up the beach where it hid under a breadfruit tree. I thought I was going to get bitten to death by a snake at sea. Turns out I was just a taxi for a very calm but rather rushed reptile. I once had diarrhea at 100 feet. That sucked. It was amazing how warm it made me at depth, but was a nightmare to clean up. I vomited at my own stench, or maybe from the flu. The only scare I've had is some jackass in a yacht cruising through our dive location at full throttle. You could hear the boat coming for a solid minute or two before it flew over our heads. Our boat had a dive flag on it and we had a boy with a dive flag on it. They didn't even slow down. Barracuda, sharks, rays, manatees, dolphins, all cool. Humans are way scarier. I work as a paddling coach on lakes. A number of times I've attempted to gesture at a pleasure craft for them to stop, only to have some dude in cargo shorts wave back like an idiot is higher than I can count. Free dove to about 160 feet in Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. It's where a lot of the free diving world records are set. Super neat place. Google a picture. Anyway, I'd never really been past 100 feet free diving, but this was the perfect place to do it. No current, there's ropes to keep you straight and allow a slight pull back up. Scary part is that you become pretty strongly negatively buoyant after like 60 feet. So you're basically hauling A down while doing nothing and using very little air. So I'm dazed out a bit, feeling good and counting the lines that mark depth, and all of a sudden feel pressure like my trachea is going to collapse, and wake up and realize I've counted to the line that's around 160 feet or so. Very scary moment because I wasn't sure if my body could take the depth or if I had gone too far and wouldn't have enough air to get back up, which is a much slower and more air intensive process. Well, here is my story. I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced divers, cave divers, than I. Just an advanced certification at the time. I am leading the dive, as to get used to pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession. They are mentoring me. It is a Texas puddle. Visibility 10 feet max. Not too deep. Maybe 25 feet. Unknown horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass. We follow a line, string, put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another, so I know I am about to hit a small sunken boat. Don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in a same state of decay, so I am first in the group. I get to the boat and see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. Curious thing is, it looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. Hard to see, too much muck in the water, so I touch the boot, thinking it is by itself, but it won't lift, like it is attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out, hands, the calf, and I see the second leg now. F with a big letter F, right? I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascent to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. No one wants to surface, but it is a rule that if one says up, others in a group must abort. No questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what is a diver's sign for a cadaver? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though trying to stay calm and take time. So, we are on the lake's surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So, I tell them there is a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone. Once they see I am serious, a fun bunch, right? So, I describe and detail what I saw. We go down. I don't lead anymore. We make a group search pattern for the line. But once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backwards, as there are a number of boats on the line and who knows in which the body is in and how far we drifted while talking it out on the surface. Well, we find all boats before finding the original one, of course. So, our customary leader goes into the cabin of the boat and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point. Went right in. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So, gluing information together from what we learned later on, turns out the police or some other agency had a body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. Well, I died a little that day. Saved someone from drowning while scuba diving. Person had an epileptic seizure at 85 feet of water in a pitch black cavern that I was diving also. I was hovering above just watching the flashlights move about when I noticed one flashlight not moving. I swam down and was met with the other diver with no regulator in their mouth, eyes open and just on their knees. The diver's buddy was next to them and in complete shock to what was going on and was not assisting whatsoever. 15 years of diving and instructor training came over me like it was second nature. I thought a regulator just came out, so I popped mine out and offered it to her. That when I noticed she had done mentally checked out, I popped my number 2 regulator in my mouth and attempted to put my number 1 regulator in her mouth, but her teeth were completely clenched. I then pressed the purge button to get air into her mouth and noticed her cheeks moving, so I know air was getting in there. That was good enough for me. I then grabbed her under her arm and get the regulator flowing in her mouth and swam to the opening of the cavern and then up over 60 feet to get her to the surface. One on the surface did everything I was trained to do. Inflate BC, dumped her weights, got her on her back and started towing to land. As I'm towing her in, she is regurgitating all the water she swallowed and inhaled. It seemed like gallons of water. Got her to land where other divers assisted me in getting all her gear off. She was breathing fine and alive but in shock for a while and slowly came around like nothing happened. We were very lucky that we were only 10 minutes into the dive, or for sure we would have both been bent and spending time in a hyperbaric chamber. The crazy thing is she didn't tell anyone she had epilepsy, and when we later reviewed her consent form she checked off no to epilepsy. I put myself at risk shooting up to the surface like that, but if I came across that situation again I would not hesitate to save someone's life. Night diving is incredibly creepy. You don't realize how dark the ocean is until you are in it. I don't like closing my eyes in a swimming pool during the day. F that night dive I have a couple friends who did night dives for their PADI cert. The Byford dolphin diving bell accident. Long story short, some divers came up from an extremely deep dive at an oil drilling rig, and someone F'd up the decompression procedure and opened the door while the chamber was still pressurized at depth. The 4 divers were instantly killed, and the one nearest the door literally exploded and they found bits of his body all over the oil rig. So, next time someone tells you that people don't explode in decompression chambers like you see in the movies, tell them they're wrong. I did a shipwreck night dive on New Year's Eve one year, and it was spooky as hell. 80 feet down, really small plane. Visibility was obviously not great. I've only done this one night dive, so these slow moving fish would come looming out of the dark. Scarier to me was getting back on the boat, because it got really stormy. You'd be looking up at the ladder, and it had come crashing down right next to you. The waves were crazy. My brother got hit by the ladder, but not too badly, and we all managed to get back okay. Not my story but my parents. They like to scuba dive when traveling and have gone several times over the years. Once they visited Mexico and went diving there before I was born. I'm not sure where they were exactly, but my mom was slightly lower down than my dad and looking at the ocean floor. He was looking up and around. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. From my mom's POV, she was going along having a grand old time looking at the sea critters below, when suddenly my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up and a barracuda was directly in front of her, closer than was comfortable and staring intently, scary teeth on full display. It was focused on the shiny necklace and was just hovering there, transfixed. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace and they slowly and calmly moved away from it and it took off without bothering them anymore. But still pretty unsettling and taught my mom to be a little more aware of her surroundings when diving. I wear heavy prescription lenses and can't wear contact lenses. Halfway through a week-long liveaboard dive trip, someone dropped a tank on my prescription mask and shattered it. I usually had a second set with me, but could not find them and only brought one. Because hey, nothing had ever happened before. I am functionally blind without corrective lenses. I can see colors and that's about it. Starting about 5 inches from my face. I was devastated, but decided to go diving anyway. With my husband as my seeing eye diver, I could see my gauges, so I felt reasonably safe. It was among the most amazing 3 days of diving I've ever had. I saw the colors, shapes, and movement, without being focused on the details. I actually took many of the best underwater photos I'd ever taken. I wasn't worried about focusing on a particular coral or fish. I was looking at the larger color patterns, so it didn't turn out to be the disaster I'd thought it was. I dive a lot, several times a week. My area has a lot of theoretically dangerous things: sharks and barracudas, morays and stingrays, blue-ringed octopuses, cone snails, box jellies, siphonophores of all kinds, sea snakes, stonefishes and scorpionfishes, venomous catfish, crown of thorns starfish and various sea urchins that can hurt you in several different ways, titan triggerfish, and so on and so on. But only one thing has ever got me, twice. Are you ready? Clownfish, like Nemo. They are territorial and brave and will get in your face if you're near their anemones. I usually respect their space, but I was distracted watching something else a couple of times, and turns out they will actually bite if you don't leave their space fast enough. For real though, I don't have particular horror stories, but the scariest moments are probably when I get caught in strong currents and have to crawl on the bottom to fight it, going hand over hand like I'm climbing a horizontal wall. Despite what a lot of people tend to think, especially looking at the daunting list of dangerous animals in my area, secret isn't your problem. You leave them alone and it's fine. Sea conditions like waves or currents, and above all human error, are the real killers. I got the bends once. I was careful, followed my charts and my computer, had appropriate depths and surface time, but I didn't drink enough water so I was all out of whack. Felt fine until I got home. Mild headache. Then I woke up and it was just pain in my left arm, elbows, fingers. Couldn't even bend them without bad pain. My headache was intense and I was so dizzy. Called my older, more experienced dive buddy and I got rushed to the hospital. Docs got me hooked up and fluids, checked my dive logs while the decompression chamber was set up, and then got me in there with a nurse. 8 hours in a tube about the length of a cupboard as wide as maybe a double bed. I was on oxygen and hooked up to an IV and it was so loud, with all the air rushing in. As soon as I got to depth the pain vanished. It was crazy. I'm fine now obviously, but I wasn't allowed to dive for a month, which sucked, but hey, the dives were pretty great. Throwaway account, as this story is well known among my circles and it would be easy to identify me. I grew up in Oz. When I was 15, I took the family boat out and over the reef myself to clear my head. Mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 28 meters, 90 feet, when I was only rated for 60 feet. Mistake number 2. Whilst diving, I spotted a 3.5 mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds: curious, harmless, and lunch, very much harmful. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I had been trained to do, as there would be no way for me to outmaneuver it or escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields, which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away. But back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve, the idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal. So if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I do a perfect move to give the beastie my arm, just before the crunch. However, it occurred to me that I had left my sleeve on my bed. Mistake number 3. I had my kelp knife drawn, and stabbed it right as it bit me. It swam off, and I was alive. However, now I had a series of problems. 1. I had huge open gashing wounds on my arm from the bite in open water, and was trailing blood everywhere. 2. Once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water and salt and open wounds don't feel good. 3. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Hello Ben's. Mistake number 4. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. Mistake number 5. When I got to the boat, I really started to wish I had done as my dad had said and had the comms fixed. Mistake 6. Or that I had upgraded the first aid kit like I had been threatening to do. Mistake 7. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down on my tricep and attached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. Oh, and I lost my deceased grandfather's favorite kelp knife that he had left me. Not me but my brother, and not deep sea. Sorry, he was 18. Part of the dive club at his school. They went on a diving trip. The crew that handled the dive counted heads wrong and halfway through the dive the boat went back to shore without them, so there they were 2 kilometers from shore with their only option to swim back. There were about 5 of them. 2 girls 3 guys. All of them between 15 and 18 yo. About halfway through one of the girls couldn't swim anymore and started crying. My brother along with another guy swam with her, dragging her along, making sure she didn't drown. Everyone made it out okay. Worst part, school tried to hide it, and had the audacity to suspend my brother from school for catching him with a beer while on the trip. Needless to say they were in deep sh when it came out. Not sure exactly what happened though.